I've spent hours and hours talking to the top guys in the field up at BU. And what they tell me is the thing that worries them the most is repetitive trauma to the head before the age of 12. I want to shift the discussion for a few minutes. Let's talk about actual health and safety concerns, all right? Now, like a lot of people in the media industry, I've done a lot of stories in the last 10 years about concussions, about head trauma. I've spent hours and hours talking to the top guys in the field up at BU. And what they tell me is the thing that worries them the most is repetitive trauma to the head before the age of 12. There's something that's happening in the brain before kids are 12, 13, 14 that makes them particularly susceptible to long-term damage. And it's not even so much they say about concussions, but about the repetitive subconcussive trauma, the constant hitting of the head in practice. What is the possible justification in the face of all the science we now have, and the fact that when you look at guys like Tiki Barber, he didn't play tackle football until what, you were in 8th grade? Yep. I don't think Tom Brady played tackle football until high school. I don't think Aaron Rodgers played tackle football until he was in high school. Why do kids 6 and 7 and 8, Brian, have to hit their heads against each other?
Well, I mean, it's, you know, the argument is how young is too young, but, you know.
12. I'll say 12. Well, you also just as a starting point.
You got to take into context. Some of these players who didn't play until they got into high school, they grew up in cities or states where they didn't even have tackle football till they were able to get there because the school districts couldn't afford to have a football program. But in Texas, you know, you start playing tackle football as soon as you can carry a football for the most part. But, you know, we've done a lot of studies ourselves within the league looking at injuries in sports. We've consulted people on injuries in sports because before we started tackling at age 6 and 7. We thought 4 and 5, not going to happen. They need to do flag. Right. Okay, flag. It wasn't until 2 years ago that we allowed 6-year-olds to actually play tackle football. It wasn't until 2 years ago.
Wait, so up until 2 years ago, you didn't let 6-year-olds?
Correct.
So you're kind of going in the opposite direction of most of the country?
I started tackling at 7.
Yeah.
7.
I've been playing football since I was 7.
Yeah, and look at you, you're a mess.
If you ever look at some 6-year-olds sitting, it's like seeing 2 pillowcases.
It's like a glorified hug.
And you have weight classes.
I'm not a doctor, but what I understand is that it's the opposite because their neck muscles aren't as strong. They're like bobbleheads. They're going to get more hurt, and they haven't had a time, and there's almost as much force when 2 70-pound kids are hitting each other as when
and the recovery can take longer for younger. The younger the
it.
child is, I think it can take longer for recovery too.
Well, Jeremy, I mean, Bart's right. I mean, if you ever see, I could show you some films of 6 and 7-year-olds tackle. It's a glorified hug. It's a wrestling match standing on 2 feet.
That's not what Matt's showing up there.
Those are 6 and 7.
Those are older kids.
Those are older kids.
I mean, Brian, to be fair, before they play all the age groups on the same day. So we'd be setting up to shoot our 8 and 9-year-old game last year, our 10 and 11-year-old game. We'd be watching the 6 and 7-year-old games too. There are kids getting hurt left and right there. I mean, this season in particular, we seem to see more ambulances coming on the field, taking kids off. And it wasn't just the juniors or the rookies. I mean, there were definitely some 6 and 7-year-olds.
How serious were those injuries?
Right. And then I was going to say, you see people call the ambulance just because when they get there, they're taking somebody. You know, they're going to take someone to the hospital.
And no doubt, a little kid has a hard time distinguishing between pain and injury. He's just hurt. You know,
right. And you don't see that kid. You know, like Tiki's alluding to. That kid maybe got hurt. He got taken away in an ambulance. 3 hours later, he's back at the field watching his older brother play. Because it's just precaution.
But a lot of times, I think it's important for you to tackle at 8 and 9 because you have to learn how to tackle. You don't want a lot of guys that don't play football and they try and play in high school, those are the ones who get hurt. Because now by the time you get to high school, I'm a trained killer and I know how to hit. You don't know how to take a hit. You don't know how to fall. You don't know how to brace yourself. You don't know how to be in compromising positions and protect yourself. So everything I learned as an 8-year-old prepared me to be an older kid and understand how to protect myself. It taught me about technique. Now, I played 11 years in the league, and I started playing when I was 8. I've had 1 mild concussion in my life because I was taught by a coach that taught me to use my shoulder, not my head. So I think it's important what we're teaching our kids and the techniques that we're teaching. I don't really agree with this heads up movement either. I think it's safer, but I don't think it's the right thing we should be teaching our kids. I think it's other techniques we should teach our kids. You won't see any coach in the NFL saying heads up, because you run up like that, you're going to see kids get hit with helmets from the runners to the sternums, to the ribs. Yep. Now you're going to have lacerated lungs and things like that, collapsing lungs, because now you're telling the kid to run up with his chin up. And now he's going to get knocked out.
No, you're going to miss.
Right, you're going to miss.
You're gonna
miss. The guy's going to put the crown of his helmet right in your chest, and low man wins in football. So you teach a kid to hit at an angle where you're low, but you can see what you hit, and you slide your head to the side, and you hit with shoulders and not heads. And a lot of times it's a bad teaching, because the guy who's the coach read a book about football for dummies, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. That's why I got involved with my son's team, because I said, you got to be kidding me. What did he just say? Like, no. My son ain't playing for this. Let me get involved, because he's going to get my son knocked out.
Well, as you said, as you heard Brian say, there are 18,000 kids just in this league. There are hundreds and hundreds of coaches. What kind of qualifications are required to be certified? I'm not really sure. But would you trust these coaches to teach the right techniques to your kids?
That's why, as a parent, you have to come to practice, and if it's not being taught, you.
But what if you don't know? But you're a pro linebacker, and all these other parents, they might not know what is right.
My mother wasn't. She made sure that I was receiving the right information.
Yeah, it's the parent's responsibility.
You go get the information.
Right? If your kid is interested
all the coaches are educated as far as the proper techniques of how to tackle. You know, it's sometimes, does it translate onto the field sometimes? You know, kids do what they're going to do sometimes. But, I mean, I agree with Bart. As far as the heads up, I went through the heads up training. Matt and I both did it last year. The heads up is great if you're tackling a stationary target. How can you focus on all those things you have to process within milliseconds on the field?
Right.
You know, down here, it doesn't translate to the game that moves so fast.
Right.
You know, so, you know, in the helmet-to-helmet contact, it happens. It's incidental. It's incidental. When you lower your shoulders, your head follows.
Yeah. Well, and there was a coach last season who was instructing his players to hit each other.
Right. That was
their helmet.
Yeah, and he paid the price.
And that's why he's suspended.
Right. And then, you know, he's not in our league.
Yeah, and look, Jeremy, it's an inexact science. We still don't fully understand it. We can look and hear statistics, and the NFL even says that 1/3 of their retired players are going to have some sort of cognitive problem going forward, and that brings in the existential problem of the NFL. Could it go away if parents are finding out that their kid could die unnaturally too young? Yes, of course. But I think, as we're all talking about, there's positive change. And this all started back in 2008 when Congress, using our tax dollars effectively, called hearings for the NFL. And it started a discussion. And at the end of the day, as long as there's a discussion, there can be progress. 8 years ago, when I finished playing, I got knocked out. And it was week 14. I was unconscious. 3 plays later, I came back into the game. Drew Bledsoe threw an interception. For those who are Tony Romo's fans, after the halftime, Tony Romo was starting from then on because of Drew Bledsoe. Also for Tom Brady, for those who are interested in that bit of trivia. But I came back three plays later. You look at the NFL now, if someone is even close to being knocked out, they take your helmet, you go into the locker room, you have a concussion protocol, and they figure out whether or not you can play or not. Now, is the testing 100%? No, because you can fake it. Right, you can downplay your baseline, and you know, so you can pass it. But as technology starts to increase and diagnostic testing for, you know, dark spots on your brain or concussions gets better and better and better, then the NFL has to really look at how they're handling concussions, and that's going to happen.